Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Everstage's Go to Masters Show, Season 3, where we converse with RevOps and go-to-market leaders from some of the most successful companies today and learn from their unique stories. Joining us today is Darren Fay, VP of Operations at Litera. Thank you so much for joining us today, Darren. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks for having me. A little bit about myself. I come from being a firefighter, so not really an operations background typically. Jumped into working with companies and Sprint Corporate to start, where I focused on leading sales teams and operations teams, and eventually made my transition over to software as a service. From there, I've been able to focus on a couple of teams. I've focused on revenue operations mostly, but other operations as well, which has been nice. Uh, I've worked for companies from all scales down to seed stage all the way up to publicly traded and everywhere in the middle. And it's been a
Very
lot of
cool.
fun. And Litera, the company I'm at right now, is one of the very few full service legal software companies on the market.
Yeah, and it seems like it's all AI native too, which is the theme of the day. So good for you.
Yeah.
I just want to double click on the firefighter thing because you said I've heard a lot of stories. People get to operations from almost everywhere, but I had not heard firefighter. But I bet you got a lot of good preparation for some of the oddities of our roles.
Yeah, it's interesting. You think firefighting is probably not connected into operations, but in reality, a lot of the stuff that firefighters do are really tied to process. So people start something and then they develop a process, and the firefighter's job is to basically follow that process. So, you go on to a scene and there's a set of tasks you should be doing in a certain order and making sure that you keep a safe scene, you work on patients, a whole number of things like that. Example would be, on a traffic incident, if there's a car knocked over, one of the first things you're going to do is crib it and make sure it's stable, right? Before you do anything and try to pull anybody out of it. Otherwise, you can create another emergency. And so, it- surprisingly, firefighters are really great at process and following,
Oh, it makes sense. And obviously, the last thing you want to be doing on operations is firefighting in the negative term. But yeah, it's all about process, having a procedure, establishing what works, keeping calm,
yeah.
following, and then I guess some improvisation as well. There's always something new that comes out of you, but
hmm
I guess to the extent where more of what you're seeing, you've been prepared for,
Yes.
the better off you are, rather than having to think in the fly for every single thing. That's really cool. So, good segue into just a theme we want to get into today, which is all about change management when things are in flux. There's a new process, there's a new system. The company is adapting, and I find often without um, sharing too much too early, but it's a really hard part of our jobs as an operations teams, and it's not something that many of us are naturally good at or they're especially skilled at. But what's your take on this? Any lessons you want to share with us about how what has worked for you before and how do you approach change in general and change management particularly?
Yeah, in operations, one of the first things you're going to deal with is having to put an initiative in place, right? You're going to have to figure out how to solve a problem, and you're going to put something in place. And in doing that, it takes change. One of the first stages of appropriate change management is going to be, should I do change or should I not do change? And if you're in the position where you cannot make a change and you have the same desired output that you'd like to be able to accomplish, that's the best case scenario, right? So if you do need to go through a change, making sure that you're taking the time to have the conversations about outcomes. I think when people oftentimes in operations get a request to do something, one of the first things that they go through is they go through this experience of figuring out, oh, I'm being asked to do this. Now I'm going to go accomplish doing this task. Well, it's not about accomplishing the task. It's more about, what is it we want to get out of this task? And I think, the typical operations person is brought up by an executive or one of the leaders in the organization to come up and say, we'd like you to do this. Well, the operations first step is to say, well, do you really need me to do this, or is it what is it you'd like to get out of it? Like, let's talk about that. One of the first things I like to do from a management perspective is to say, what are the outcomes we're trying to get out of the change? And evaluate if those outcomes are easily achieved from doing nothing or doing something, and maybe a hybrid approach of going after it. The other main thing that I think that is important from change management is to, once you've done that and you've decided you're going to make a change, not just doing it on its own, assessing the situation as you go through the initiative and then coming back to it and evaluating, did this meet the objective? Because if you completed the task, but you didn't actually you didn't achieve the objective, then what was the change for? And so taking the opportunity to really understand why you're doing something and making sure that the actual thing that you're doing as a task is tied directly to the outcomes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And oftentimes there's a time disconnect, right? Between the you get caught up into the implementation, into doing the thing that you were going to do, that it's easy to just keep your eye off the ball, and the ball might have been somewhere else. But yeah, I want to bring back that point of just even asking, what are we doing this for? Not even to try to not do it, although you're right, maybe not changing it is the best, but just make sure you understand what's behind this, and is this the better way of dealing with this? And or are we just uncovering where we're fixing a little problem here, instead of dealing with a bigger root cause that could then cascade into a bunch of other benefits? So that's it is good advice for operations people, that we're action oriented and sometimes people pleasers, and we like shiny new software tools. So
I'm so
uh,
glad you brought that up because I think, one of the things that I believe in is there's this methodology within Six Sigma called the five whys. And one of the first things, if you're going to go do this, if if somebody brings you an issue rather than, hey, I want you to do this, you take that issue and you say, let's understand the core root of the issue. Because if you don't, like you were just referencing, you sometimes can solve like something that's on the surface of an issue. It doesn't really actually solve the problem. It solves the surface issue that you're aware of, and then that will continue to rear its ugly head as you go through dealing with the other problems because you've never really solved the underlying issue. You just solve one means of which that issue rears its ugly
mhm.
head. So I do like that quite a bit, and that's definitely a something we try to live by as well in our team.
Yeah, no, good advice. There's this concept of what do you really need versus what do you want, or what do you think you need, and how do we justify things to ourselves, to our teams. Um, I think we've covered a little bit of this, but if there's any other nuggets you want to throw our way around needs versus wants, and how do you even distinguish those?
Yeah, I think going into it with an understanding that everybody is operating from the same space of they don't know what they don't know. And oftentimes people will bring something to operations to say, oh, I want this or I need this. Now, the reason they're saying that is because they have a previous experience that's led them to understand a problem in a certain perspective and to be able, they've articulated a solution that makes sense to them. What the best thing to do to when you're attacking some change management projects is to say, what is it that why is it that you feel like this is going to solve this solution, and then get back to your outcomes and then offer alternatives and have that open conversation to understand that, hey, listen, half the company is going to come at it from a different area. You also have to deal with what might work for one department might not work for another department, and so you need to also, whether it makes sense and it seems really easy to solve this problem today for, let's say, the sales team, maybe pump the brakes, like slow down to speed up a little bit and say, okay, well, let me make sure with marketing, even though it doesn't seem like it's not going to affect marketing. And then same with CS, and really understand perspectives of how it can impact others. Because, it may not be on their radar today, but if you were to go roll out a change in one area that doesn't seem like it's impactful, they could see those things and understand that, it could have a negative impact on their world. And it may not be addressed because somebody else is so busy living in theirs.
And then you might find that all this change, if it doesn't get embraced, it doesn't get adopted widely, it can just end up being maybe not a full disaster or failure, but it might just not live up to the potential of what you were trying to do, which is a shame since we have limited time and resources, and there's always more to do. Um, Something you said just brings to mind something I'm seeing more now, which I'm sure you are too. The pace of change, this AI native companies, the stuff we have now that didn't exist 5 months ago,
Yeah.
5 weeks ago. there's a lot more. There's new problems coming up. There's a lot of new interesting ways of solving problems, and new players are coming up with really radically different approaches that some of them have to yet prove themselves or not. But I think the palette of colors we're painting with now as operations professionals, to use a bad analogy there, it's just bigger than it's ever been. And we don't know what's gonna stick to the wall, what's not, what's gonna last. But there's certainly a lot of innovation happening there. So just maybe relying less on what's worked before and being a little bit more curious and open, and being able to zoom out, are traits that are going to be important for RevOps leaders and RevOps people in general.
Yeah, it's funny with AI, it's going to be extremely helpful to a lot of businesses, right? There's going to be a lot of really great things that we can do with it. And I think a lot of people assume it'll result in less headcount or less need for headcount in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, it will. I think where we're going to see a separation is a shift of where people spend their time. And when you think about something like an AI agent that's supporting, let's say, like customer support, or you're looking at an AI agent, a voice AI agent, or things along those lines, that agent needs to be trained, right? And that agent needs to have information piped into it. And then that agent's going to interact with your customers. And if you blindly trust an AI agent, you're going to have a poor experience. And so, where you might have somebody spending time with a customer, that person may now be spending time with the AI to determine if the outputs are making sense for our customer base, right? And so, when you think about it from an operations perspective, there's going to be a big shift in AI in order enabling us to be able to do more and to interact and provide better services for our customers, but it's also going to change the way we work and what we do and how we operate and how we maintain the business. So jobs will change intrinsically, but we're going to get a ton of value from it. But the type of people we need are probably going to change.
Yeah, and context setting is so important, right? We spend all this time. And there's a recent post on LinkedIn. A friend of mine was saying we spent all this time beautifully crafting this context prompts for AIs, and then we might have employees in our team that we just neglect to spend the time with to get them up to speed. And in hybrid or remote environments where they're not in physically in the same place, it's really tough for someone coming up into a job to learn this stuff that you're able to learn almost by just osmosis by being there. So the takeaway there, well, let's just make sure that we give our people at least the same amount of time and care providing context, um, as we do to those bots that we're so excited about. And a lot of it is outcomes, right? It's just what are you trying to do? So it just comes back to that. If you can't land there, um, everything could be just for naught. Um, do you see any changes in the let's say, the type of person that would be attracted to this role that could be good for it in the future, as any traits that are you're looking at that might be you're fine tuning your calibration on how to find the next great ops person?
Yeah, it's funny. Ops people typically, when you hire them, are technical people, right? And I think you know, technical assets are important and there's a place for them in every operations team. But, when you're looking for an operations leader, one of the first things that I look for is the ability to understand the business context. If they can't bridge the gap between the technical expertise and the business expertise, then they're essentially just an admin, right? And admins add value in their own right, but they're definitely not focused on, a full service solution to the stakeholders, right? So, being able to understand the connection between the business and the technical aspect of the business is really important. Also, the ability to zoom out. So, the ability to be able to take your perspective of what you're working on and understand the different areas it could impact. And the other piece that I look for, which is across every role I look at, is a continuous student mindset. So somebody who's constantly looking to adapt and develop and kind of improve themselves. It doesn't have to all be in the same area in operations. It can be in unique spaces. But typically what it tells you is that they're somebody who's willing to adapt and to continue to harness their craft. So if you have somebody who's coming in and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know all this stuff," and they're not going to continue to evolve, then they're going to be fine for the time being. But when you
Mhm.
get to the point where business changes or a new trend comes into place, they're behind the marker, and you need to make sure that you're set up in a place for scale. So for me, constant education mindset, like continuous like student mindset is important. Ability to zoom out and understand all the different
Yes.
impacts of problems, and then the understanding of the connection between the actual business and the
Funny
operation.
enough, all those 3 things are things that AI is a really good enabler of, right? If you're
Hmm.
curious, if you want to learn, I remember there used to be a time where you couldn't get the right answer, you were afraid to ask, or right now you can just open up the chat button on the side and it's live as you're going through the meeting. What is this acronym I don't know about? Or the CFO talked about the trade-off between growth and profitability that the board, and I don't know what that is. Just give me a crash course on that. There's a lot of that. So definitely interesting. Same things that worked before will continue to work, and maybe even in a bigger way. Um, well, good. That's some hope for the people that have been doing well. Just keep learning, keep curious, stay curious. Use the tools at your disposal, and that's a good recipe. Want to change gears a little bit just to talk about comp every stage. As you know, we're primarily an incentive compensation management company. We're into planning and other things now, but our core audience will want to hear something related to comp plans, comp design. Anything you want to share about that? There's, I'm sure you have some stories about what has worked, what hasn't worked. Did you have any pitfalls to avoid? Everyone will be very excited to hear more knowledge about this.
Yeah, compensation plans are definitely more of a art than science in my
Hmm.
opinion. Everyone's going to get paid, so everyone knows that you're going to be all right, regardless. Like there's going to be some money to be made in a compensation plan. The hard part is like, why do we set on a compensation plan? Like, what is the underlying reason for doing, a commission plan for a salesperson? It's not just because we want to make them make a ton of money. We want a specific result, and we want it tied to outcomes, right? That's why we have compensation plans.
I think we have a title for the episode. It's the outcomes based thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
cool.
And so, if you're thinking about building a compensation plan, I think what happens is people start to get really focused on building a compensation plan that looks exciting, but in practice may not be exciting. And the only ways to ensure that things are going to meet that outcome are, number one, they need to be simple. So a sales rep shouldn't have to go get a degree in mathematics to be able to figure out, or accounting to be able to figure out their commission plan. They should feel super motivated by it because they can understand where the levers are. And they should feel like they can have an easy route to that achievement, and it's impactable by them. If you start putting too much in a compensation plan and it's too heavily weighted in an area that they can't influence, it has the reverse effect, right? Of motivating a salesperson to go in and push extra hard. So tying it to the work that they are doing, tying it to the business outcomes and what you'd like to achieve from it. Most software companies, it's tied to like bookings or like net new sales. And, it could be tied to some type of retention if they have like a mutual target of managing accounts at the same time. If it's like a smaller company, like more of a hybrid role, or it could be something that's, tied directly to, something else that you're trying to achieve. And it may not be a sales role, and you may tie it to a business outcome, and you may want to tie it to something different. You may have a renewals team that you're basing it off of retention rate, right? And if they're not set up in a way, so this is the catch with compensation plans, is if you set up a compensation plan and it all looks great on paper, but you don't enable the team to be able to influence or impact that number readily, and they're unsuccessful with their ability to be able to impact their number, they're not going to be motivated by it. So if you develop a compensation plan around net new bookings and you're having the conversation with the rep, but you're not enabling them to be able to fully own it and have that conversation, they're not going to be as motivated. So their ability to control the outcome of it is really important. The compensation plan being very simple is important. And the ability to to have that tied to those objectives is paramount, right? Like what the company wants. So your company objectives may change year over year, but if net new bookings is the top priority, or you have a specific product suite you're trying to aim at, then maybe you can complicate it a little bit by going by product. But ideally, you want it to be, very simple. Is going to be the most effective way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd add just one thing to that. It's just visibility, early visibility into whatever it is they're supposed to control. Because if there's impact, but they don't know if they've impacted till 2 months after, that's too late to actually be a motivator. So interesting. We ask this question often, and we get variations of this answer, which is the right answer. By the way, it wasn't a true question, but that is the right answer. But why is it so hard to actually do this in practice? And I'm gonna give you one anecdote, or just something we see often is leaders around a company want to pack the plan with everything they think that is good in the world should be in the plan, and that's one of the causes that things get complicated and it ends up eroding everything that's in the plan, good and bad. Um, a- any other reasons, or any have you seen other situations where that has happened, or other situations similar to that have made this very clear in practice problem become such a difficult to execute in the
Man,
real world?
Jose, it is 100% tied to too many priorities at the executive level, is why that happens. Generally, if there's one too many things that somebody's trying to impact, and they're trying to do it all through the compensation plan, that's where that falls apart, right? There's going back to that outcomes motion. It's about, okay, why do we do these things, and what are we trying to accomplish? Every company has a set of objectives, and every company has a priority list on those. It's just natural. Like you can't have everything just as important as the rest. The best way to figure that out is to say with the executive team, okay, you have these 5 things. Okay, if only one of them is to happen, which one should happen? And you force people to think about it and like, okay, cool. If I only had one to choose from, okay, great. If you had two to choose from, what would they be? And you have that conversation. If you had three to choose from, what would they be? Build your compensation plan around things that can be impacted by the compensation plan. The other piece is there are other ways to influence the team. And, sales teams are incentivized with salary as well. There is a little bit of that compensation
It's
design to say,
and they have managers that can manage other actions that are not necessarily in the plan. So, yeah, good point.
exactly. And I think we're thinking the same thing right now, which is not everything has to be tied to a compensation plan. Some of that stuff relies in roles and responsibilities, and if you can manage people in that way. And I think in sales specifically, we get so used to, the commission plan being the motivation. Well, there's other motivators outside of the commission plan. There's also the ability to, most sales reps also want something more out of their day than just making money. Most sales reps want to unlock some understanding of becoming a sales leader themselves in the future, or understanding the business a little bit better so they can do their sales better. Or it could be they just want to understand the tip to tail of what's going on. And I think a big reason that people make this move is they're afraid of sharing the why behind stuff. And I think sharing the why behind things almost becomes like tedious work, and people don't like to do it. But if you can spend the time explaining why you do things at a business, and slow down enough to explain why businesses are making the decisions they're making, people can get behind it. And, if you also have like an advisory board, right? You take an opportunity to get some feedback from the team. It doesn't mean you have to take that feedback and actually action it. So there's the book The Advantage, like by Patrick Lencioni. He talks about weighing into buy-in, right? You don't necessarily have to take what they're telling you and put it into action, but every little piece of information you can get from the field helps inform how they're feeling. And just like your customer, and how we take a ton of time getting information from our customers to figure out what we're going to do as a business, we should do the same thing with our internal customers, which are our sales reps. The best way to figure out how to incentivize them and get them to do things is by having conversations with them. Nobody's going to be the same, but if you can broadly cover it in the same way, you'll be all right. And
It's
then
what they tell them to do with their prospects, right? Uncover the why, have the different conversations, look for the objection. And here we are now putting a plan for them, our customers, in a way, and we're not wanting to do that or willing to go as far as you need to. It's fascinating. So we'll keep putting out the message into the world how plans should be, and how to avoid it, and maybe one day we'll get more buy-in into the general leadership around this, because it's something that I'm curious about. It's, again, easy in theory, often very hard in practice.
Well,
Um, mhm,
Jose, I think the other thing that comes to mind when I'm thinking about this is, you a lot of times the sales leaders you get are sales reps who've done well, and they get moved into a sales leader role, and they don't always know how to manage a sales rep and go through forecast calls and to support them in that way. And sometimes the only way they know how to do that is through a compensation plan. And so I think to educate people out there about how to do that, I think a big piece is learn how to manage the people and figure out what they need to do to be successful, break that down for them and walk them through it. Because then you don't need to, if you can help them understand how each thing is connected in their ability to get to their commission, their quota, then you can walk them through the behaviors that need to take place. And then now they're motivated to do those things because they're connected. But they may not really associate the connection between generating pipeline, increasing your win rate, and all those things into, how it helps them get to their goal.
yeah, you're right. Some people have almost like a sixth sense, an instinct for what to do, and go away. It works for them, and then they become leaders. But it doesn't necessarily mean they can articulate it, or even just pass it on to the next generation of people doing that role. So fascinating.
Exactly.
Cool. So I don't want to just fully run out of time here without touching on, again, the topic of the day, like AI. I know I'm sure you've done some cool stuff, but you've had successes using tools that are out there, like, I don't know, Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever you guys use at work. What has you excited about the possibilities? What early successes are you seeing, or cautionary tales? Where do you see this landing?
Yeah, I think exciting things right now are, areas like the voice AI agents, I think is an exciting one because I can tell you from a consumer mindset, historically the voice um, agents were not necessarily helpful. They actually piss customers off more than they help, right? Because they can't figure out how to respond in the right way, and then you get angry. You're just sitting here yelling at the phone. I want like a person, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you
Human, human, human.
exactly. Sure, you can commiserate with me. Um, but I think one of the telltale signs for that is I think we're going to see a little bit of the pendulum swinging in the other direction. I think we're going to see a lot of people moving to trying to replace stuff like this. I think you'll see the same thing with AI support agents through text, even. You're going to see a lot of people moving stuff to those things. But I think at the same time, what you'll uncover is it's not a full replacement for that. And I think people need to remember that the customer experience, the reason you're rolling out these AI agents is because you're trying to enhance the customer experience, right? So if you're rolling out an AI agent and you're not doing the work to maintain the agent and to figure out that it's delivering the best results and you're following through with it, and you don't have escalation pathways put together to get them to a real person if something does go south, then you didn't fix and improve the customer experience. You made it worse. But you made it worse and saved a little bit of money in the process.
Yeah.
And so,
Till you don't, because you have to go back and hire someone, or it costs you on
yeah,
the other side in the form of churn.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so I think the telltale sign for me is going to be, we're going to see a lot of people cut back on. I think it's going to come back in the middle where it's going to be a little bit of a hybrid approach where people still want to talk to people. Until that day where the AI agents are you know, you can't tell the difference. Then I think maybe, but I think there's still this. It's not quite there yet to the point where it can fully replace somebody. I think it could be an added benefit for it. I think the other thing that I'm really excited about is, in operations, you have a lot of SOPs, documentation, things like that. And you have field people, you put those things in. There's been an art over the years around how to organize that stuff. So if somebody needs something, they know where to find it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I think a big win for an operations team is reducing some noise and allowing you to spend a little bit more time on high value tasks by leveraging things like a Copilot or something where you can actually look into and source through material and connect it and be able to ask it questions, and you can use it as a database. And then you can train that to be able to say, hey, you can give it the answer, but then also give them a link to the documentation so that they know that they need to verify it and you put something in place. But I definitely think that area will be more valuable and actually save more time for people for the short term, because I think that's where the AI is at today. And I think we're bridging into the area where people are using more and more of it for the support pieces. And I think that's okay. Just taking a minute to realize that it's not a full stop shop solution at this stage. Like there's more
And I
to it.
think that the bar for support and those it's been very low so far.
Yeah.
So the aim shouldn't be to just replace an experience that was already kind of shoddy, even with humans, right? Imagine where you would have a world where support was so good, you'd want to have your chatbot open all the time. If I'm in whatever application, I'm constantly asking questions, I'm getting feedback back, and 97% of it that is coming from a bot. But every once in a while, there's another human that's doing a more rewarding job as well, orchestrating, understanding, finding out new use cases, giving context, and then everyone's jobs get better. There's still humans on the other side, curating and improving and raising the bar. And there's humans on our side as user. I mean, until the point that it's agents talking to agents and we can all go home, but let's hope that doesn't happen too soon. But that's a really good insight. So it's not it's augmenting, not replacement. And I think it's just, yeah, moving the bar to a whole new standard of what this should be.
Yeah, I think a good way of approaching it, if somebody's looking to do it, is if you're going to use an AI agent to do, let's say, like support stuff, making sure that your internal teams use it first. If you have the internal teams putting stuff into those chatbots and then they're understanding what's coming out of it and they know the answers already, now you're using internal teams to train and understand and build it to make sure you're getting a good customer experience with it. And when you have the external people and the customers reaching out to it and using it, they have a similar experience to what your internal teams are going through. And so, running those tests and running those scenarios is a great way of doing it. So if you have an internal team, yeah, why not have them also using the same experience that the customers are experiencing?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you're ready to take off the training wheels internally, then maybe you're ready for external exposure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. Excellent. Well, we're getting to the end of our time together. I want to thank you. But before we formally wrap, we always ask if you have any specific advice, one, two, three key pieces of advice you'd give to someone that's starting out in the RevOps world or looking to enhance their career. And I know we've touched on some of those points already, but if you wanted to reiterate or come up with a new one,
Yeah,
feel
I
free.
think a couple of things that stand out to me are communication is vastly undervalued in operations. Learning how to communicate to the right people and how to communicate to each different type of role is really important. So books like Crucial Conversation, I think, are table stakes for people to understand how to like have difficult conversations and be able to push in different areas. I think the other one that is important is networking. I think, a day and age where you go just apply for a role is harder. And I think getting to know people, understanding what the way things are being done and using people as a resource and really having those conversations and communities, I think are really important. Podcasts, webinars, ebooks, anything you can get your hands on to really get another person's perspective changes your mindset and helps you understand how to solve problems differently. So you decrease that pool of knowledge that you don't know. So you have a little bit more perspective to go after and solve problems as businesses start to experience them.
Yeah, really good advice. There's pendulum swinging back to valuing more and more the human touch now that it's becoming rarer and at the point where it's almost replaceable. What we find is more people are actually valuing that more and more. So it's again, it used to be a good idea to network. It still is, and it'll only help you further your career and yeah, learn from real humans having real experiences, which is why we do this show. So I want to thank you again for coming on board, being a part of this, and it's been awesome having you. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks for having me.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this insightful episode of Go to Masters. Thanks for Darren again for sharing his experiences and valuable insights. And remember, you can tune in every week to learn more from game changers driving hypergrowth companies across the globe. Go to Masters is brought to you by Everstage, your trusted partner for transforming the way businesses handle sales compensation. I'm Jose Aleman, signing off. Thanks for joining us.